Okay, so after taking this whole thing apart off camera, I basically straightened out the front part of the chassis here that was pretty wavy. The way I did that is I just put this over a corner of a vise and just hammered the other side flat against it. The nice thing is that this is aluminum, so it was pretty easy to flatten out. The thing about this though is that the chassis has a couple of holes on each side, and what those holes are for is they were riveted. There was a bracket riveted on that held the bottom together. So this really should be kind of tight. There shouldn't be that big of an air gap there. So what we're going to do is we'll fabricate a small bracket and screw it in, and that'll reinforce the front. What I also did is I flattened out the rear piece here, and same thing, put it on a flat vise and just hammered the top of it until it comes out flat. Again, nice to work on this because it's aluminum, it's soft, and it just flattens out pretty easy. So that's what we did with those two things. Okay, so completed the front bracket that'll hold the sides on the front in place. I may have mentioned earlier that this was stainless steel, but it's actually 1/16 inch aluminum, so it was really easy to bend on the vise, and then just hammered it flat. So what we're going to do now is basically line it up like so, and then mark the holes that we're going to drill on the sides. I'm not sure if I'm going to rivet this on yet. And then the holes on the bottom are for the bumper. I'll probably just screw it on because you're not going to see this when everything's put together. So you're not going to see the screws, the bolts from the screws. They'll be hidden inside. So I'll probably just screw it on. So we'll see how that goes. And then the only other thing I have to do with this is I'm going to make another little tiny L bracket to put underneath here as well as here, and I think I'm just going to fill this with epoxy because I think the threads on this are stripped, and then I'll kind of fill that in with epoxy as well, and then just drill and rethread these two holes. So stay tuned, let's see how that goes. All right, so got the bracket on the front on. I used screws. I happened to have a couple of 2.5 millimeter screws, and that's how I'm going to keep that on there. Didn't really want to rivet the thing if I didn't have to. So, all right. So now that we got the front stabilized and it's not moving, going anywhere, we have this issue with these tabs. So what I'm going to do is I made a couple of little brackets here that I'm going to basically super glue them on underneath where these tabs go, and then I'm going to use epoxy to make a new tab and reinforce it. So first things first, let's super glue these little tabs on. Get off some of this dirt and grime. Okay. So we'll start with this one here. And this is just basically to keep the tab in place when we fill it with epoxy. So gonna make sure I got the right side in here. Okay, so that's the first one. I'm gonna give it a few seconds. All right, it's already set. So now I'll go for the other side. We'll give that a few seconds. Don't really need this one on this side, but I figured, might as well reinforce this side as well. What we're going to do is we're going to re-drill and re-tap that stripped hole right there. Okay. So now what we're going to do and then we'll just let it set for a few seconds so that way it hardens just a little tiny bit. And then what we're going to do is we'll flow it onto these little brackets here. Bend this down just a little bit. All right, so let's start. And then what we'll do is, it's okay if there's an excess of epoxy, because we're just going to grind off the excess. Later on. Again, we're going to fill that hole with epoxy so we can drill and re-tap it. It's a 3mm tap that we'll use on it. So we'll let that set. We'll let it set overnight, and then we'll pretty it up tomorrow with a grinding wheel and a little bit of sanding. And then we'll have 2 strong tabs again. So let's take a look at this in the morning. And I think that's pretty much all the repairs. I found enough spare parts for everything else that was missing or broken. We're gonna put a new fiber tops, so we got some few extra parts here that I dug out of our spare parts inventory. The steering arm stays, and we got 2 new axles for the front. We got suspension holders for the back. I might be mislabeling these things, but I think you understand where I'm getting at. So I think after we grind this down and re-tap these, we'll be ready to put this thing all back together again. So stay tuned. Okay, so it's been a day. We've let the epoxy dry. It's pretty hard right now, so I'm going to take the Dremel and I'm going to flatten these before I drill a hole, because the ultimate goal here is to flatten these, drill a hole, and tap it with a 3mm tap, because there's going to be a 3mm screw that goes in here that holds a piece of the front. It'll hold that little piece right there. So let's go at this. Okay, so we've got our two tabs back in place. This was broken and now it's kind of fixed again. I'm just going to clean up the inside here and then I'll come back and we'll drill the holes and tap it out and tap them out. All right, so off camera as I was cleaning this up a little bit more, the epoxy started peeling out. So what I did is I went ahead and I super glued it to strengthen it. The epoxy for the most part is still fine, but you know, I'm afraid of it continuing to get brittle or cracking. So like I said, so I super glued the metal reinforcement pieces that we had on there just one more time. And they seem pretty sturdy. I took the tap, and it's a 3mm tap. Basically just tap the holes back again that were drilled out. So now we're ready to accept the 3mm screws that'll hold that in place, and I think we can start putting the rest of this chassis together now. That was pretty much the harder part of all this, is just fabricating and getting this front end stabilized. So let's see where we go from here.